Bloomington taking a deep dive into the downtown streetscape plan.
There are a lot of folks who, really are looking at that price tag and are struggling.
I firmly believe that we have the resources available to do this.
That's coming up on Sound Ideas. Good evening, I'm John Norton. Also on today's show, McLean County farmers, tops in the nation for corn and soybean production.
We're in such a tremendously good location here.
And pickleball has become all the rage. If you didn't know, just ask an orthopedic surgeon in the Twin Cities.
Pickleball can lend itself to injuries because people aren't necessarily thinking about listening to their bodies.
Those stories follow a Bloomington Normal News update just ahead. This is Sound Ideas on 89.1 WGLT and WGLT.org, part of the NPR network.
Support for WGLT comes from Bloomington Normal Audiology. Here My Story continues with local patients Ralph and Carol Weisheit.
Why do people wait? We don't wait when we can't see. We get glasses. So why don't you get a hearing aid? Because, you miss out on so much.
Ralph and Carol's full story can be found at bnaudiology.com.
From the campus of Illinois State University in Normal, this is WGLT's news magazine, Sound Ideas. I'm John Norton. Bloomington City Council members are weighing in on the proposed transformation of downtown now that a final report awaits their vote. WGLT's Eric Stock reports the downtown streetscape plan has a larger price tag than first projected, but its scope is much broader, including work that city leaders say will have to be done anyway.
Bloomington City Council members generally signaled support for the streetscape plan during a non-voting meeting last night. Several council members said they welcomed the flexibility of implementing it in phases over a number of years. The plan includes improved walkability, lighting, expanded public art, and significant infrastructure improvements. The Springfield engineering firm Crawford, Murphy & Tilley produced the $750,000 report for the city. The firm's Mike Sewell told the council the final draft was based on feedback that came from 2 public open houses, along with input from city staff, business owners, and other stakeholders. Sewell says those who provided feedback chose what he called a Goldilocks hybrid model that includes both modern and historic designs.
We are creating a bold new look for downtown while still being respectful of the historic architecture that's compatible with all the older buildings in downtown.
City officials previously estimated the streetscape price tag at $25 to $30 million. The engineering firm estimates the cost at $59 million to transform Bloomington's downtown. That includes $20 million for infrastructure upgrades that the engineering firm says the city will eventually have to plan for with or without a downtown plan. And the streetscape is detailed in 6 phases. There's 4 additional phases in its highway program, that's U.S. Route 51, East and Madison Streets, and a downtown fringe program outside the downtown corridor. Those elements are estimated to cost an additional $18 million. Infrastructure work includes replacing aging sewer and water mains, in particular combined water and sewer lines, and building underground water detention to alleviate flooding concerns. Ward 3 Councilmember Sheila Montney stressed that planned infrastructure made up a substantial portion of the streetscape plan, and that should be prioritized over beautification.
We need to call that out intentionally and separate that from what people perceive when they hear about the streetscape project generally as being one that prioritizes beautification, because there are a lot of folks who really are looking at that price tag and are struggling.
Yeah, Montney says if the council decides to go with the streetscape plan in full, they'll have to find money in the budget elsewhere. Ward 5 Councilmember Nick Becker said dividing the streetscape plan into multiple phases may make it easier for the city to absorb the cost and make cuts if needed.
Can this step be done more efficiently? Instead of 12, can we do this step, or with alternate suggestions, can we do this step for 8 because we don't have the money for 12 this year, as an example?
Deputy City Manager Billy Tice responded the City Council will have that flexibility to adjust the streetscape plan as other priorities arise.
Each of these phases are intertwined but independent. So I think that's very, very important.
Several downtown business and property owners also recommended the City Council adopt the plan. Even if the council does, it doesn't set aside any funding for it yet. That has developer Robert Varicella skeptical the streetscape plan will actually happen.
There's been multiple old plans like this that have been presented that I've been part of, and it seems like we get to this point and then we don't carry it through to the next step.
City Manager Tim Gleason acknowledged previous downtown plans were never fully implemented. He believes the current plan has sufficient support, and implementing it in phases makes it manageable.
The fact that we are having this conversation, I firmly believe that we have the resources available to do this.
Deputy City Manager Billy Tyus says the city will not need any new taxes to pay for the streetscape plan, though the city is exploring several options to cover cost. He believes the project would be a strong candidate for grant funding once final plans are adopted.
So there are a number of different ways to fund this, but I want to be clear that there is no proposal for new taxes to fund any of this.
The City Council was expected to vote on the streetscape plan at its April 8th meeting. I'm Eric Stock.
This is Election Day in Illinois. The polls close in less than 2 hours for the primary election. In McLean County, there are only Republican contests at the county, state, and federal level. We'll have a complete election recap on Sound Ideas tomorrow. Central Illinois continues to be the best place to be for a traditional corn and soybean farmer. Bart Bittner meets that description. He grows corn and beans on his fifth-generation farm just east of Bloomington. Bittner and his farm colleagues in McLean County helped the county reclaim its top spot as the #1 corn and soybean producer in the country last year. That's according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture's annual crop report. The top 10 counties with the highest corn yields were all in central Illinois. Bittner tells WGLT ag correspondent Tim Alexander one reason the crops grow so well here is good soil that drains well, but also holds enough water to help when rain is sparse. That was the case early last summer during a key part of the growing season.
We were very pleased, especially given the way the year started. We were tremendously dry in the month of June. Hardly got any rain in the month of June. Right at the end of June, beginning of July, we got a rain that really turned things around for us. But we were very concerned towards the end of July about what the rest of the year was going to bring. And then we got a pretty significant rain that kind of turned everything around. The one challenge that came with that rain was we had some wind damage in a few places. And right around our home farm here, just east of the airport in Bloomington, we got some pretty heavy winds that came with that rain. And we had some corn that was 5-6 feet tall at the time, and it laid it over pretty good. That corn was amazingly able to stand itself up, and other than being, elbowed over, partway through the row, we were able to get it harvested and had a much better crop than what we thought we were going to have the way the season started. And we finished with ample moisture to have better than trend line yields for us, and certainly wasn't a record year, but we had a very good year here.
Now, 2 years ago, drought definitely affected some yields in central Illinois, but you take that year out of the equation, and it just seems like today's hybrids are bouncing back from everything Mother Nature has to throw at them to keep producing great yields here in central Illinois. Are you one of those farmers where your yields have been above trend line the last few years?
Yes, we have. We've been very lucky, and I think a lot of that goes to what you're suggesting, Tim, which is the technology of the seed that we're putting out there, the seed coatings that we're putting out there, and then the practices that we're putting in place. And we're learning every year what works and what doesn't. But we've been very lucky. And again, it'd be really easy to pat yourself on the back and say, "Wow, we just did a great job," but we're in such a tremendously good location here that, consistently in a county that's one of the top producers in Illinois and in the Midwest in general. And, one, because of the great soils we talked about and the great opportunities, but also, we're a large county, McLean County. So we represent a lot of crop acres, probably the most crop acres, I think, in the state of Illinois per county. So, we're very blessed to be where we're at.
It is a large county with some very large farms spread out throughout the countryside. Are McLean County farmers close to each other as colleagues? Do you guys share a lot of your secrets back and forth? to continue this great growing condition in the area, or is it more an insular, singular endeavor?
And I can only speak for the little part of the county that we are in and represent, but we have tremendously great neighbors. Some of them are partners in business with us, either through seed business or our chemicals or anything else that, we may work through. But it is not what I would call a cutthroat win at any cost type of atmosphere around here. We all respect each other and are try to be good neighbors to each other, and really are, very lucky that we have the friends and neighbors that we have. And I, really value the input I get from our neighbors, and have learned a lot from several of them. And so, yeah, it is a very positive environment, and one that I'm really pleased my sons are interested in coming back to. In fact, they're already involved with some off-farm work through internships and jobs that have been with some of the local people we talk about that are people we work with in the area. So tremendous opportunities around this area, and also tremendous people.
That was McLean County farmer Bart Bittner speaking with WGLT ag correspondent Tim Alexander. Bittner says he has 2 sons in college, one who plans to graduate in May, and they plan to continue the family legacy as 6th-generation farmers. Sound Ideas is WGLT's news magazine. I'm John Norton. The sport of pickleball has had explosive growth over the last 10 years. In Bloomington Normal, Parks and Rec departments have added a lot of courts. A private concern is building an indoor pickleball facility. Along with the rise in the number of players, there has been huge growth in the number of injuries from the pastime. One researcher projected there were more than 19,000 pickleball injuries in the U.S. in 2022. In this edition of Sound Health, we look at the dark side of pickleball. WGLT's Charlie Schlenker talked with Dr. Joseph Newcomer. He's an orthopedic surgeon at McLean County Orthopedics. Newcomer says over time, the nature of pickleball injuries has changed.
As we're seeing more and more younger participants in pickleball, we've moved from the injuries that were typical for the older participant of fractures or chronic tendinopathies to knee injuries and sudden acceleration and deceleration injuries that we see. I've seen cartilage injuries, I've seen Achilles tendon ruptures, we've seen acute shoulder issues too with rotator cuffs.
Is there any inherent difference between the injuries that you see with pickleball and the injuries you see with tennis or racquetball?
Well, certainly in the older population, I think people fall into this false sense of security with pickleball. I think the court is a lot smaller. They see a big wiffle ball, and people feel like it's a sport that they can just begin without any proper training or getting into shape, whereas when people think of tennis, they're going to lead up to playing tennis. They're going to get back into shape. It's a bigger court. You've got more reaction time on the tennis court. So pickleball can lend itself to injuries because people aren't necessarily thinking about listening to their bodies.
So is it the nature of the sport, or is it the perception of risk associated with the sport?
My opinion for the older patient injuries is the perception. Oftentimes people just aren't listening to their bodies. You'll see people on pickleball courts for hours because they tend to rotate in and they rotate out, and if they're not listening to their bodies, that can lend itself to injuries.
When did you start seeing pickleball injuries? How long ago?
It's been at least a decade now. The first group of injuries that we used to see were usually wrist-related, a lot of falls. People were just getting into the sport, and we went from the fractures to now we're seeing chronic issues. We're seeing tendinitis, tendinopathy. Some people are getting tennis elbow, gripping the racket too tight for too long a period of time. The injuries are evolving.
How have they changed?
Well, we're starting to see, like I said, the acceleration, deceleration injuries, which is like your Achilles tendon ruptures and your cartilage injuries in the knees, as opposed to the fractures. We're seeing fewer and fewer fractures. I think people are getting smarter with regards to what their limitations are on the court.
If, like any sport, you need to prepare to play it, how should people warm up to play pickleball?
That's a great question, and I think that is the $64,000 question: is how can people set themselves up for success? First and foremost, what you just touched upon, which is the warm up, is so important. How many times do you see people just going right out and start hitting the ball around? That's not a proper warm up. A warm stretch to get the tendons out to length is really important. But even beyond that, things that people can do to prepare themselves to play in the off season, right? So continuing to maintain a cardiovascular semblance of shape. They can do balance training. The older population, and when I say older, I'm in that population at my current state. So I would say anybody older than 40 at this point really should spend the time working on exercises that promote balance and exercises that promote core strengthening. The lower extremities are extremely important, so your quadriceps and your hamstrings, making sure that they're in condition, but also working on back stretching and back exercises and lower abdominal core exercises. And then for your older patients, one thing that can help with the falls is balance. There's a lot of different exercises you can do to work on balance. Believe it or not, yoga as well as Pilates there's some great poses that promote balance. Heel to toe walking, single leg stance, balancing on uneven surfaces. So, trying to balance on a cushion or a Bocce ball is quite helpful.
What is good for getting ready for sudden changes in direction that any racket sport requires?
Yeah, that's and one thing I want to make clear, injuries are going to happen. I mean, it happens in every sport. We're going to continue to see them. Just because when you have sudden acceleration, deceleration, change in direction, it's hard to get joints prepared for that. And as you see younger athletes getting injured with similar type of mechanisms, some things you just can't prepare for. But when we get a little bit older and we start having arthritic changes in our joints, it's even more imperative that they do activities that would challenge that to get the biofeedback and the proprioception in the joints able to change direction.
How should people rehab pickleball injuries?
I recommend seeking professional consultation. This is not self-serving promotion, but I think people tend to sit on injuries, and it's important to make sure that you're getting proper care and attention. But the one thing I would say about rest and recovery and how important that is, as we age, we lose water, and as we lose water, tissues become more brittle. And so hydration is really, really important. So when you're done participating for a couple of hours, it's important to make sure that you maintain hydration, you get the proper rest. It's a cool down stretch can also be quite helpful. But again, the adage, it's all fun and games until somebody gets hurt. We, as the sport continues to evolve and more people participating, I suspect we're still going to see these injuries. For a lot of people, it's hard to turn that switch off.
That's orthopedic surgeon Dr. Joseph Newcomer with McLean County Orthopedics. He spoke with WGLT's Charlie Schlenker. One study suggests older people make up a disproportionate share of pickleball injuries, though that is changing as the sport becomes more popular with younger age groups. About 9 million people in the U.S. play pickleball. Newcomer says it's better for those who do get injured to seek same-day treatment.
Support for WGLT health coverage comes from Carle Health. You can count on Carle as your partner in healthcare. Information at carle.org.
Thanks for joining us on Sound Ideas, WGLT's news magazine. The winners of this year's City of Bloomington Black History Essay Contest include Kamara Bowie. She's a senior at Bloomington High School. Bowie takes inspiration from someone in the music world who cuts against common stereotypes.
David Augustine, better known as D1, is a Christian rap artist from New Orleans, Louisiana. He graduated from Louisiana State University in 2008 while releasing his first album titled I Am Who I Am in the same year. D1 is an educator who taught middle school math for 2 years. After teaching, he decided to focus on his music career. Educators seem to always find their way back to the classroom, and D1 is no exception. He currently teaches a civic studies course at Tufts University. In his music, he calls out other rappers and hip-hop artists who make music about violence, degrading women, etc. He's called out rappers like Lil Nas X, Rick Ross, and Meek Mill on their choice of glorifying drug usage, murder and misogyny, and mocking God and making what some would call evil music and hypocrisy. D1 has released music that he hopes reaches a youthful audience and is invested in showing them to turn toward the Word of God and introduce them to a new light. He's made it known that hip-hop music doesn't have to be about violence and other things as such. Rap is extremely popular amongst teens and young individuals around the world. Although D1 doesn't make typical rap music, he uses a hip-hop vibe in his music without incorporating the murder, sex, drugs, and creates a pragmatic example for the public. I personally enjoy hip-hop and rap music, and being able to listen to it in a more positive light has changed my perspective on life greatly. The music we listen to heavily influences us, so what we listen to truly does matter. It creates a version of yourself you never knew could exist, whether that may be in a constructive or negative sense. I recently made the decision to follow God and take it seriously, which meant changing for the better. A big part of that included the music I was listening to. D1 has introduced me to a new feeling of music. As for myself, I can confidently say as a teenager in this generation, it is extremely difficult to find music that doesn't promote the secular sense. But I find delight in not listening to the music other kids my age listen to. He's made me feel like I'm allowed to listen to rap without the worry that music is violent or provocative. I think if D1 can reach an audience like us and grasp us the way he does, then he has great power and influence. Not only is he a great role model for the younger generation, he's generous to his listeners as well. On his website, when you go to order his album titled From the Hood to Harvard, you can order it at your own price with a minimum purchase of $7. He's showing that music doesn't have to be expensive like most record labels and artists set for prices. The high prices for music comes across as greedy and selfish. So I think it's a fantastic thing that he is taking what he can receive. D1 has created such an impactful influence in the music industry and the world. He continues to spread the word of Jesus Christ and hold other artists accountable for their wrongs. His work has led many to follow Christ and inspired others to continue God's work.
That's Kamara Bowie, the first place winner of the high school division of the City of Bloomington Black History Essay Contest. Listen all this week during Sound Ideas to hear the students reading their essays. WGLT's Charlie Schlenker produced this reading. And that's Sound Ideas today. WGLT's news magazine is made possible in part by Bloomington Normal Audiology. I'm John Norton with thanks to Charlie Schlenker, Eric Stock, and ag correspondent Tim Alexander for contributions to the show today. Ryan Toohey edits Sound Ideas. This is 89.1 WGLT and WGLT.org, part of the NPR network.